It would be easy to read this Sunday's Gospel and Jesus' parable of the wealthy man who had too big a harvest and had to build bigger barns and took counsel with no one and considered only his own security and his own comfort and his own ego. It would be easy to look at that story and at that man and think it serves him right because, he was rich and selfish. But I would suggest we should be careful because the poorest of us watching this video are so much wealthier than the man that Jesus described. That the amount of food that we have available to us, that the amount of security, that the amount of comfort, the entertainment, like everything that we have compared to him, he was poor and we are wealthy. And we're not just wealthy compared to people 2,000 years ago. The most secure and wealthiest king in Europe 300 or 400 years ago would have been poor compared to anyone living in our poorest neighborhoods. In terms of luxuries, in terms of food, in terms of options, in terms of transportation and travel and experience and education, we are wealthy. And not just compared to history. Next time we feel the pinch of water restrictions and our grass is turning yellow, just to think of so many places, so many women, more than half of the world's population, where people, women usually, travel for miles, walking for miles each way to fill a jug of water, of decently potable water, so that they can cook and clean for their family. They wouldn't be able to imagine a place where clean water came out of pipes in your house and where there was so much extra clean water that people sprayed it all around on the ground. Unthinkable wealth. I believe my salary is underneath the 4% range. It's slightly older data, so probably the numbers are a little higher now anyway. But anyone making $40,000 a year is in the top 4% of wage earners for a family around the world today, or 10 years ago. Incredible numbers. Like, we don't feel rich, right? We feel like we're barely getting by. We've got payments, we've got concerns, we have things that we really, really need. We don't feel rich. But if we went and invited somebody from the Amazon, if we invited somebody from somewhere in the middle of India to come and visit us for a week or a month, they would tell us that we are very wealthy. And if we went and visited them for a week or a month, we might have a much better perspective on stuff. Ultimately, this gospel story is about our perspective on stuff. Whether that becomes the absorbing need of our lives, or whether things, wealth, have their place without taking over our hearts. And it's an important thing to consider. How is it that followers of Jesus should be wealthy? We can keep poor boying it. We can keep pretending that we're have-nots, that we're struggling, that we don't have enough, and live in that lie. Or we can acknowledge that we are incredibly wealthy, incredibly blessed. And then ask the question, how is it that a rich person should live as they follow Jesus? I would suggest that the first and most important response would be gratitude. Gratitude for so many good things, for the medicine, for the supermarket, for shelter over our head, for water that we can drink. I know we all buy plastic water bottles, but we can drink the water that comes out of our faucet, for a refrigerator full of food that sometimes goes bad before we eat it. Gratitude for so many good things in our lives. But also a perspective that remembers that these things are not the source of our happiness. Oftentimes, they're the source of our constantly increasing need, desire, addiction for stuff. Right? When we had so much less, were we less happy? When you were newly married and couldn't pay the bills and didn't know where you were going to live, and just scraped by and couldn't afford cable television, right? Like, were you so much less happy than you are today in all of the square feet that you have and the new cars that you drive? They say that if you ask, when you survey people about what it means to be wealthy, if you ask people that earn $25,000 a year, they would tell you that it only takes $50,000 to be rich. But if you ask people who earn $50,000 a year, they're pretty sure that you would have to earn $100,000 to be rich. And so as our wealth grows, so often our appetite grows with it, which is dangerous and sad. For us to acknowledge our wealth and then, in gratitude, to make sure that we are doing everything we can to inoculate ourselves from this attitude of greed and always looking for more. And there's a couple of things that we can do to help with that. One is generosity, gratitude, and then generosity. To find ways to give of what I have once I can acknowledge that it's excess, that other thing that I want, I don't need, that I don't have to have this model of car or this address, that I can live and still be generous. And it'll be my generosity, my concrete choice to give to those who have more need than myself, to find worthwhile things where I can give with generosity, my charity, my time, my money, in order to recognize that in that giving, there's something more valuable than having, than hoarding, than keeping for myself. The story that Jesus tells is a story of hoarding versus a story of generosity. And we would be well advised to develop, to exercise that muscle of generosity. And in doing so, we might also find a place of contentment. That we're always taught to strive for more, for bigger, for better, for greater. But I found that I have everything that I need. And there's so much joy and peace in having everything that you need and not having to try to figure out how to get more. A bigger boat. Well, if I had a boat, I'd probably want a bigger boat, but I've decided I don't need a boat. And so now I don't have to pay an extra license and find a place to store it and a truck big enough to pull it and water in which to use it 3 times a year. Rich people problems. I think contentment and generosity will be good muscles to exercise. And gratitude would be a good perspective once we're able to honestly admit that by all standards in world history and by all standards around the world today, you and I are both incredibly wealthy.